Hello, good morning everyone, and welcome to our Marketing Masterclass for today. We're looking today at 2022 strategy for a marketing strategy for construction manufacturers. So thank you very much for tuning in and joining us. We've got a great session lined up today, a really insightful panel who I'll introduce in a moment. And we're really looking forward to having some great conversations around all the things that construction manufacturers can be considering to help drive their marketing strategies for 2022 and beyond. So some of you may have tuned in for our marketing masterclasses before, some of you may be new. Hopefully you'll find lots of insights, and do tune in for other sessions that we've got planned, because this is part of a big series. So yeah, welcome to the day. We're going to run for somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half. We'll see how the conversation's going. Usually we find we do get some really great conversation going, and there's lots of questions coming through. So we'll do our best to cover those. So if you do have questions on the webinar, please put them in the Q&A function that you'll see within your Zoom panel, and we'll save some time for questions at the end that we'll get insight from on the panel. So yes, logistics out the way. First thing to say is welcome to the panel. So joining us, we've got Ian Bellamy from Glenigan, we've got Saoirse Walsh from Roka, we've got Andy Lambert from Content Cal, we've got Lee Jones from our own NBS, and we've got Joe Wilmot from Think Tank. So welcome guys, and thank you for joining us. I think within this group here, we've got an incredibly insightful range of marketing skills from all areas of the marketing mix, probably. So thank you for giving up your time and joining us, and I'm sure the audience will find lots of interesting conversation coming out of this. So before we get into the way we're going to work this morning, we've got some number of questions which we'll work through with the panel, but I wanted to tee that up a little bit with sharing some hot off the press research that we've got at NBS. So we've spent the last couple of months surveying manufacturers about how they go about doing their marketing, and we'll be launching the full report of the Construction Manufacturers Marketing Index in January. So you'll be able to go on the website and download that. We'll be sharing it in much more detail, but I wanted to share a couple of highlights this morning before we get into the discussion, because I thought this would be really useful to kind of frame things. And so we've had 165 respondents and marketeers within the manufacturing space within construction have shared how they go about doing things, and we found some pretty interesting results, and we don't think there's any other data quite like this around there in the industry. So hopefully everyone's going to find this useful. So I'll share a couple of highlights quickly, and then they'd be interested to get the panel's input on some of this. So the first thing really is that there's some really big trends, macro trends across the industry that are going to drive change and have positive and negative influences on marketing that manufacturers need to be aware of. So everything from digitization and sustainability and building regulations on the positive side, to the negative impacts of ongoing COVID restrictions, Brexit, material shortages, and so on. And I think it's really interesting to see that those are the big factors that are on everyone's minds and marketeers' minds as well. And kind of unsurprisingly, off the back of that, 89% of our respondents are expecting to change their approach to marketing either a bit or a lot. So you know, big focus on digitization has been a constant theme for the last few years, but that's something we're seeing come across very strongly within the results that we've got. So that would show that most manufacturers are looking at changing how they do things. And in terms of audiences, specifiers being the #1 audience that most of the manufacturers that we've heard from are looking to target, along with contractors, distributors, and others. So real big focus on making sure that they're reaching the people that are making specification decisions and being able to influence and build awareness with them. And then a little bit around channels. So I found this really interesting, actually. So we asked what channels manufacturers are focusing their efforts on. 53% of their time going on digital channels, 18% of their time and budget going on construction channels, so such as NBS, Glenigan, anything that's kind of unique to construction. But I thought 29% still on traditional channels such as print, you know, DMs, brochures, etc. I think that's still quite high. I'd be interested to know what the panel think when we get to that in a moment. And we also asked about barriers to marketing. So what are the main barriers to successful marketing for manufacturers? Interestingly, the top one was limited in-house resources, but then other things around ROI, budget, as you'd expect, difficulty reaching target audiences, and so on. So some really interesting takeaways there in terms of what the blockers are, and maybe we can have some discussions around what manufacturers can do to kind of unstick some of those. And then the final part I wanted to touch on before we bring everyone else in was budget. So from our data, we've done some calculations, and it looks like, based on what we've got, most manufacturers out there are spending around 2.3% of their total turnover on marketing activities, which is pretty low compared to other sectors. Actually, this data is from CMO survey. We tried to look at how manufacturing compares to others. And actually our results, 2.3%, chime very, very closely with manufacturing over here on a broader scale, 2.4%. But if you compare that to other industries, particularly consumer-based, but other B2B industries as well, such as financial services, manufacturing spending a tiny percentage of budget on marketing. So I think there's definitely a conversation to have around that as well. So without further ado, I've talked on long enough. I'd like to bring the panel in here and talk about, looking at those stats that I shared there, and thinking about everything that's gone on this year and the topsy-turvy conditions that we're working through. What else have we learned that will influence marketing from this year, from 2021, and what would the panel like to share as observations? So who can I bring in first? Andy, don't know if you've got any thoughts on a kind of a broad marketing level on this one.
Yeah, the budget thing is a very interesting one. Obviously, being in a tech company, actually that 9.7% you have on a tech company is way under what we spend, I can tell you that. And it's interesting. It's just definitely shows a bit of a cultural challenge we see predominantly in B2B marketing when it comes to how we see marketing, how we perceive marketing. We typically has been seen as a cost center rather than a profit center. And I'm really hoping those cultures will change. Certainly, as what we've seen as a result of the last 20 months is lots of people having to change their marketing tactics as a result, right? So shifting away from those the traditional methods that you mentioned already, Robin. So definitely a bit of cultural change needed in B2B marketing specifically, because if you look at our peers in B2C, you'll see that they understand the purpose of marketing. It's ingrained in the culture of an organization. Yet B2B typically lags behind the adoption curve as to understanding the importance of marketing, and not just from a marketing as in a lead generation perspective, but marketing is in building the brand, which certainly that is a concept that's sometimes a bit alien to a few B2B businesses. That's what I'd open with, Robin.
Yeah, great. Is that ringing true for anyone else?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the pandemic really changed not only how people work and find manufacturers, but also why they do it and why they work. I think it was in a Salesforce survey in the US that said that, the pandemic changed 90% of marketeers' engagement strategy for the better, because, while the pandemic caused a lot of businesses to struggle, marketers really had to learn how to be innovative and really delve into very, creative and meaningful engagement, and really assess their strategies, kind of cutting things that didn't work, trying new things and nourishing those that did. So kind of starving the things that didn't and feeding the ones that were. And I think just to kind of build on your point, Anthony, just about, having, more authentic content and kind of transparency, because I think the other thing that has really come to light in the last 2 years is, everyone from like your colleagues to your customers see, as one could argue, kind of your most authentic self. Everyone's doing Zoom meetings at home. People could see, dogs popping up, children crying, all those kind of things. And I think now people are a bit more wary. And I think especially in kind of B2B marketing, whether it's, a newsletter or a landing page, I think it has to be a little bit more authentic, a bit more transparent. And I think especially now, as people were kind of, some people buying online for the first time, or buying basically everything online for the last year and a half, they are more kind of wary of these campaigns. And I think they, I know you had a good point on, marketeers still going for 29% of the traditional channels, which I feel in the industry is something that, you know, they've always used. I mean, Roka, for instance, has always used print media. And, you know, at the moment, we wouldn't think of leaving that because a lot of our customers would still read all those magazines. But I think with the digital side and looking at, you know, new ways of targeting a new audience on a digital spectrum, it's more of an accompaniment to the print. And I think they have to go hand in hand, and you can't just leave one go and move on to digital. So it's kind of going hand in hand, and building and engaging a new audience.
Definitely, it's about having the right channel mix in terms of where your audience wants to engage, and if you've got authentic content and the right message, you know, you then need to figure out which channels are going to be right for you. And we'll discuss channels a bit more later on. We've got a specific question around that. Joe, I'm interested in your thoughts around this one, and particularly in terms of, you know, what kind of macro level changes we've seen across the industry in this year.
I think it's been pretty seismic. I mean, obviously, there's been a huge amount of change. I think people emotionally are, you know, a lot of the conversation is around how people are quite fatigued with that change. But I think also they've been quite reflective. Just echoing what Saoirse was saying, many marketers that we work with and many brands, they did pause everything at the beginning of the pandemic, but then they've used it to reflect. And also there's been a lot of experimentation. I think people have been testing lots of different things to see what works, being more open to doing sort of proof of concepts, seeing, you know, does this channel work for this, and also perhaps being a little bit more comfortable with things not always working the first time and needing that experimentation. I think that's very much learning from the consumer side of things and bringing that sort of tactical approach in. And then I think there's been that increased need for flexibility. You know, we've seen all the price increases, the constant change, the issues with supply chain, which means that, you know, many manufacturer comms and many brands comms have to be, you can't just set them in January and leave that. You know, people have been changing their prices throughout the year, which obviously impacts on what you're doing with, you know, your suppliers, your distributors. It's complex.
Yeah, seismic, and I think, you know, it's shown that demand doesn't go away. If it just gets pent up, if it's you know, if it can't be released. But we've also probably learned to live with a bit of uncertainty and have to all flex our approaches and strategies as we go. And I don't really see any signs of that changing next year. If anything, accelerating.
No, we've got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I
exactly.
think.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, building on that point, I was going to move on to the next one, which is linked to that, and is obviously a really big question, particularly in construction. So, in terms of what will the economic landscape be like for construction and manufacturers, particularly in 2022, because we know that obviously everything is very linked in construction, particularly everything is very linked to economic and project activity. So we've got some stats here from Glenigan, which Ian has kindly provided, and these are from Glenigan's latest market forecast. Ian, I wondered if you wanted to give us a quick overview.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Robin. So I thought it'd be interesting. You know, we've all talked about change here, and obviously it's the kind of as marketers, I think it's the most important thing that we understand that change, react to it, all that kind of stuff. So I thought that this would be interesting just to try and paint a picture of how the next 2 years will play out. So Glenigan, we provide information on all projects that are happening in the UK and Ireland. So we've got this view of the development pipeline, and then we have an economics team who analyse that information and then project how the next 2 years are going to pan out. So I thought that'd be interesting. I don't promise to deliver this as well as our economics team do. They're professionals, but I do my very best. And I'm purposefully not going to go into too much of the detail because I've only got a few minutes, and the report is available if anyone wants to read it. But the overarching message, I think, is that the recovery is going to continue into 22 and 23, which I think is a really positive message. And given everything that's going on, any positive message is very welcome. And like I say, in keeping with the topic of the webinar, as marketers, understanding or making the effort to understand what's happening in our market is probably more important than it's ever been. I think I've been with Glenigan about 11 years now, and the last 2 years I think have been unprecedented in not just the scale of change, but the speed of change as well. And so that presents a new challenge to how we as marketers respond to that. So this chart that we're looking at the moment, it's looking at the underlying value of project starts in each quarter, and that's projects that are worth under £100 million. So that removes the huge projects like HS2 and things, which would just distort these figures and hide this view, which is the underlying core of construction, and it paints a more robust picture of activity. Now, in 2020 overall, we saw an 18% drop in the value of underlying project starts as the pandemic hit, and sites across the country either completely stopped or slowed significantly as social distancing measures were rolled out. But this year we'll have recovered 11% of that decline, and 2022 is forecast to deliver another 7% growth, which brings us back up to almost where we were pre-pandemic. And then going into 2023, we're anticipating a further 5% growth, which starts to put the industry back into a much more positive position. So if we can just go on to the next slide. Thank you. So this starts to take a closer look at the various sectors of the industry, and obviously there are some areas that will perform better than others, and I thought it'd just be worth picking out some of these. The private housing sector is always a significant one, so it's worth having a look at that, and that recovered well after 2020, helped by the mini boom in the housing market at the end of the first lockdown. But the withdrawal of the temporary stamp duty reduction and a kind of dampening in home buyer confidence is going to slow the speed of that growth over the next 2 years. Another call out is the industrial sector, which stands out significantly with 33% growth this year, making up the 29% fall in 2020, but then a further 24% growth projected for next year. And that growth is driven by a rapid demand for warehouse and logistics space, driven in no small part at all by the increase in online retailing, which we've already mentioned. And that almost doubled, online retailing almost doubled between February 2020 and January 21. So the demand for warehousing and logistics space is high, but the availability is as low as it's been since 2009. And that's really the key driver for growth in that sector. And also investor confidence has been slowly and very cautiously returning to the hotel and leisure sector, which was obviously and understandably hit massively last year. So 22 and 23 are looking positive, but the sector is really unlikely to get back to pre-pandemic levels until 2024 and beyond. So to say, very, very top level. I hope that's interesting. It's just some highlights, but the full report's got loads more information on those industry sectors. And of course, all of this activity has got that backdrop of material supply issues, costs, skill shortages, all that kind of stuff. But I hope that at the very least, this information offers some encouragement that the recovery looks set to continue over the next couple of years.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Ian. So it's looking cautiously positive, I'd say. Obviously, there's plenty of unknowns out there, and I'm sure all of that's caveated in the full report. But kind of that point of that pent up demand is still there, and almost regardless of what's happening pandemic wise and so on, there's going to be progress on a number of fronts, and this should be really useful for manufacturers looking to understand which sectors they might target or sell into or market to. Saoirse, I'd be interested perhaps to bring you in quickly there in terms of how you do things at Roka in terms of understanding the marketplace and targeting particular sectors and segments based on activity levels.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we're doing more and more. Obviously, the gallery here, we have quite an extensive cultural program that would be applicable. I mean, it's applicable really to the general public, but it's quite, it is an architectural and design program, so would focus on architects, developers, interior designers. And I think, with that segmentation of the database in particular, it's really important as kind of a key to unraveling the mystery of data. And it really allows you to have a deeper understanding of your current customers and just really optimizing, all your marketing efforts. And, you end up doing more things that work, either, as I said earlier, abandoning things that are not improving or just not working. Just looking even at our social media platforms, Twitter, I think as a whole, maybe some would consider is not the greatest platform for growth at the moment, but we find that there's actually, as a bathroom manufacturer, there's a really incredibly active and engaging community of plumbers and installers on Twitter.
Yeah.
And there's some plumbers who have, like thousands of followers and have they have real clout in the industry. So we would use a lot of our, things like product updates, giving guidance, not so much talking about individual products, but kind of, thought leadership, little tips, installations. We obviously provide a lot of manufacturing videos and things that are really helpful, because, it's just, might be just a fleeting moment that they spotted, but if it's something that's quite helpful and engaging, it's something that they'll keep following us and they'll stay loyal. And it's just like another area that we would use for architects and developers. We look at LinkedIn. It's more of we find it's very active for the A&D community, so we'd have appropriate content there, whether it's talking about like case studies or the CPD program, and then I suppose for the gallery cultural program itself, we would use Instagram, as it's it's a very visual space. You can't see it from where I'm sitting, but it's we have a lot of engaging content where we'll have a lot of events going on. So we just find it's looking at the different platforms and how we can really engage with each audience and really understand that audience to a better extent.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, hold that thought, because we're going to come back to social media in a moment. But I think that highlights the importance of, regardless of economic climate, or arguably more when times are tough or things are tight, to keep those that brand building and those outreach programs going on. But really interesting to understand more about that. So if anyone wants the full Glenigan report, please log on to the Glenigan website and you can download that there. I'm going to move on to the next question and probably look to bring Lee in at this point. So that the next question really is around what will be important to specifiers in 2022. And I think there's a number of big themes here, aren't there, Lee? But obviously, for those manufacturers who are looking to reach and target specifiers, they're going to want to understand what's going on in the world of the specifier and how they're going to go about making their decisions and their choices.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's sort of a lot, like you mentioned, of high level sort of components that are going to go into what's going to be important to them. But the two probably top priorities around safety and sustainability, which I know we're going to cover later, but the building regulations are changing next year. It's probably the big one. There's a lot of emphasis being put on the lead appointed designer from a specification point of view, but also on the client, which hasn't really sort of existed before. It's going to be the responsibility in a lot of cases for the consultants, the designers, to guide the client through there. And it's all about maintaining the data and ensuring that what's being built is safe and fit for purpose and meets the required regulations, but all linking back to the golden thread. So the golden thread being obviously the information about the project through its design, construction, and end use phase to keep people safe and ensure the building can be maintained properly. There's a lot that's going to go on there, and ultimately from a manufacturer's point of view, the specifier is going to require that manufacturer's data, and they're going to require it digitally and in a means that they can transfer that from one platform to the next. I think on a sustainability perspective, there's a lot that's going on. Looking back at the last question of what we learned from 2021, I think COP26 was an absolute massive sort of marketing opportunity. There was a lot of manufacturers jumping on board there, but obviously there's things that need to be avoided. But with things like the ban on gas boilers coming in for housing in 2025 and so forth, specifiers are going to be gearing up ready for this. And it's not just the appliances side of things that needs to be considered. It's things like the passive measures of the building, so how well it's insulated and so forth. And again, going back to the manufacturers, it's all reliant on data. The whole sort of premise, Robin, is about that information being shared as seamlessly as possible to allow people to make those decisions and do the job that they need to do against the new guidelines.
Yeah, and going back to the point earlier around budget, I mean, should manufacturers be taking this more seriously than you've possibly seen, or allocating more budget to this?
Yeah,
making sure that it's accounted for.
Definitely. I think a lot of manufacturers, particularly ones that we speak to day to day with MBS, that everybody's taking the safety side of things absolutely critically because of the legislation that's coming in with it and the potential repercussions that could happen if things went wrong. But from a sustainability point of view, I think the biggest sort of bugbearer for me is the greenwashing aspect, whereas people will see it as, yeah, this is on trend at the moment, when in reality it's actually something highly scientific and something that we need to do to make sure that the built environment's being delivered as efficiently as possible to make sure that we don't get those temperature increases. So there's a lot manufacturers can do to make sure that their products stand above the competitors. It might be that they've got a more expensive product, but if they can show the life cycle value of it, embodied carbon, that kind of thing, it's really what the specifier is looking for.
Yeah, and so in terms of that world of the specifier, obviously, you spend a lot of time working with architects, engineers, others. How are they going to go about finding and selecting products, and what is it they're looking for to connect with manufacturers?
Yes,
going forward.
So obviously, depending on what the product is, there's a lot from a performance criteria perspective that they could look for, whether it's U values for thermal properties or energy efficiency and electrical components, that kind of thing. Sort of standard stuff, looking at sanitary wear flow rates and stuff like that is important with brassware and baths and things. But it's typical stuff such as where the product's made, where they're being transported from, the whole embodied carbon, is that from cradle to gate or cradle to grave? The whole sort of circular economy piece is important. And if people are looking for that, they, number one, going to want to try and get it online. So the manufacturer's website is obviously a key point there. A lot of them don't have the resource to maintain that though. And that's really where things like MBS Source come in, where you've got the sort of one-stop shop and the expertise that's structuring that information in the background to surface the relevant data to specifier.
And Joe, just on that point, in terms of the world of the specifier and the architect and so on, what are those changes that we're seeing in the industry? And architects always under pressure and time poor and looking for a simple life sometimes in terms of finding products.
Definitely, they're always going to want to find things simply. They are also really creative people, so they want to be inspired. They want to see things that excite them. So, for example, the Roka Gallery that Source has mentioned, that's definitely the sort of activity and engagement they really value. But I think also specifiers, their businesses are very pressurized at the moment. I mean, we've heard about cost pressures. This has affected the architects and engineers. They found it harder to find staff. Brexit has really impacted, particularly on architectural recruitment. Salary increases, people are wanting more money because of inflationary pressures they're seeing. So businesses are they're finding it tough. So they're going to be looking for things digitally, as Lee said, because they're going to have less time, they're going to have less people. It's tough for them as well, and as they've got these new responsibilities around sustainability and client education, they need to find the time and presumably senior people to get behind that. So I think anything that can be done in terms of providing information to specifiers in ways that it's easy, inspiring and engaging will definitely be valued by them.
So the right mix of information from the inspiring visual tactile stuff like the gallery, or some nice product imagery or whatever it might be, through to the nuts and bolts information around performance and sustainability information and all of that side of things. All of it,
everything. And then also practice based side of things. I know, for example, at MBS you have huge viewing figures from the specifier community around trying to access educational content around sustainability changes and what's going on with different announcements. And I think that shows the hunger that's there for high quality education.
Great. Well, moving on, that takes us nicely into the next question, which is around channels. So building on that, And I think Andy's got a bit of data he's going to share with us in a moment. So what channels should manufacturers be focusing on? Obviously, there's multiple options out there, and we saw some data earlier about, you know, traditional versus digital versus construction specific channels. But Andy, I'm going to flash up the stats that you shared earlier, and maybe you can talk us through them.
Yeah, I'll touch on these actually, because I think it reinforces quite a few of the points that Saoirse, Joanne, and Ian's mentioned already, which is just about some of the changes we've seen in light of the pandemic, forcing people to change decisions, take a different tack, like take time to reevaluate their approach to their marketing channels. And of course, what's happened in the world of social over the last 20 months is we've seen an incredible amount of growth, 13% year-on-year growth of social media. And what that actually means in real terms is 520 million people in the last year alone joined social media channels and have started using every single month. So what's happened here is that we've now tipped the balance. Now 56% of the world's population uses social media and logs in at least once a month. So 56% of the whole world's population. That's 4.3 billion. Yeah. Staggering numbers. So at a macro level, we've kind of, like I said, tipped the balance, and that's having a significant shift in the way that people are purchasing products. And Ian alluded to this anyway in his statistics in light of what's happening in the retail sector and logistics. But yeah, now these are estimating these are global statistics. 1 in 4 of all online purchases are influenced through social. So of course, social is growing at an incredible rate and naturally having an incredible impact in the way that people are making purchasing decisions as a result of social. So if you can pop onto the next slide for me, please, Robin. So we look at this data every quarter about the primary channels used for brand research. So where are people going to figure out what they want to buy? And this is pan-industry and global data. So search has been at the top. Every time we've looked at this for the last couple of years, search has been at the top. So fundamentally, it's still very important having good SEO, making sure you rank highly on Google. And of course, you know, Google ads help that too. Search predominantly still the main driver. But the share that social starts to take is getting increasingly large. Now, 43% of individuals will go to social media as their first way of evaluating brands. I mean, Saoirse has already kind of touched on this with the plumbers on Twitter, for example, right? Because it's the whole new way that we're trusting brands. And this is the huge like underlying impact that's happening. This is the big fundamental shift in marketing about trust and transparency. Saoirse has already touched on this, but fundamentally we need to rethink how we approach things as B2B marketers. We need to look more at our B2C peers and as to how they market, how they build brands through trust and transparency. Because one of the things that it's sometimes worth us remembering as B2B marketers is that the way that people buy products is not entirely rational. We're all fundamentally flawed humans that make decisions based on emotional biases. Yeah. So the more that we can build our brand, generate trust, the more that will serve us well. On to the next slide, if you wouldn't mind, Robin. I think I've got another one here. There we go. So yeah, from a platform perspective, these are the biggest gainers for the last 2 years. If you're not familiar with that little alien thing in the orange circle, that's Reddit. Reddit has been a huge beneficiary off the back of the pandemic and continues to grow. Really interesting platform, really community orientated. So definitely one to think about a little bit. And of course, TikTok. I mean, I pulled this data in September. TikTok's already passed 1 billion monthly active users. Like the growth trajectory is just shocking. Third icon from the left is new to someone I just seen in the chat. That's TikTok, is the one that's 689 million, but now over 1 billion. So fundamentally, but I always hasten to say, because I talk about this stuff all the time, is like, you know, just because it's new and it's growing and it sounds exciting doesn't mean we need to pivot our strategies straight away. But, you know, Joanna touched on this earlier, which is about thinking about a more experimental approach to some marketing channels where you might want to take a little bit of budget or a little bit of time to evaluate some new channels without completely shifting away from the things and the channels that we know have worked well for us. So but there's lots of choice. There's increasing fragmentation in the social media industry as well. A lot more channels, more people spread across different channels. And I think that means really good things for us because we got more choices as to different tactics and strategies that we can use and apply to our channels. So that's probably why.
Yeah, really interesting, Andy. So for a manufacturer that focuses on construction products, they might be listing their technical data in MBS, and they might have updated their website and so on, but they need to make sure their social profiles are telling the same story and are consistent with everything else that they're pushing out, so that an architect, for example, may discover them on social media or may discover them elsewhere, but then go onto their Instagram profile or whatever it might be to kind of find out more about them. They might want to go on, they might find the technical product in MBS source, but then they might want to go on Instagram and see if the manufacturer's actually got any case studies on there that shows rich imagery of the product in situ, or maybe some product videos or whatever it might be. And you get that, that cross-channel effect of having lots of different things working together. And if they're not joined up, and if they go onto their Instagram profile and it's a wasteland of content or outdated imagery or nothing, then it doesn't look brilliant and is not going to have the desired effect.
Exactly. All part of that broader marketing mix, which I think you'll touch on later anyway, Robin.
Yeah.
So, I think it ties in really nicely with people making purchasing decisions off the back of NBS, but that trust is fundamentally built. The brand recognition and the belief in the brand is built at that point.
Yeah. And the thing about social as well, it can have, people may not be in product selection mode, but that doesn't mean that if they see a product that they like, that they might stumble across it on a platform and remember it for later or save it somewhere, and actually that immediately builds that brand association, so that when they are coming to write their specifications or whatever it is, they will have that association with the product that they've seen on a different channel, which is very hard to track. But that's why we know that social has such a big influence, because it's kind of that awareness factor as well as everything that's measurable.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Well, I think next slide, actually, back to you, Saoirse, because we wanted to kind of bring in at this point and show off the beautiful Roka Gallery that you've got as a total contrast to kind of digital and some of the things that we've been looking at, but showing the impact of having a physical space as part of that joined up marketing strategy. So maybe you could just give us a couple of minutes on and tell us about the gallery and kind of how you link that with everything else that you do.
Sure. So these are some images of our beautiful London Roka London Gallery. We're just by the Chelsea Design Centre near Imperial Wharf. So the gallery opened 10 years ago, and it was designed by Zaha Hadid Architects. Zaha Hadid is a very famous Pulitzer Prize winning architect, and 2011 was actually a particularly great year for her, as she also won the Sterling Prize with the Evelyn Grace Academy School in London as well. So we're very lucky to have this building. Obviously, some of you might know the Aquatics Centre that she also designed for the London Olympics, which again was around the same time. So we're very lucky to have this public building that people can come in and visit. It is a cultural and exhibition space. As you can see from these two pictures, normally the picture that's on the left-hand side is filled with an exhibition, but we also have a rolling program of about 35 events per year that are anything from panel discussions, lectures from very prominent architects. We could have curator tours of the exhibitions. And the space is also a showroom for the Roka and Laufen bathroom brands. So Roka is a Spanish company going back over 100 years, and at the minute it's in about 170 different markets. So it's a huge global brand. But the gallery initiative was it started just over 10 years ago, and they now have 6 of these global galleries around the world. Some of them acting more as showrooms, and others then will also have the cultural and exhibition space. So I suppose the first thing to talk about, I've mentioned the cultural program, and again, it is pretty much tailored to the A&D community, but as well, we do have a huge amount of general visitors that would pop in who have an interest in architecture, Zaha Hadid in particular. The exhibitions can vary. We have one on at the minute that's called Powerhouse, the Architecture of Data Centers, which is a very niche topic, looking at data centers all over the world, ones that are being built and ones that are, concept ideas, because as the amount of data being produced has kind of quadrupled in the last number of years, and more of these data centers are emerging. So it's looking at what architects are now doing to kind of tackle this new building typology really of the data center that's, you know, not just a windowless box in the middle of, you know, the desert in Arizona, that they're actually, you know, data centers that are smaller, that are infiltrating our towns and cities to accommodate the amount of data being produced. So, you know, that's one exhibition that we have on just at the moment. But again, it's, you know, something I think that everyone can come and see. But again, looking towards you know, most of the A&D sector, if you are a working architect, it's very fascinating because it's, you know, it's on a practical level. But also we have a running CPD program as well that was launched back in 2013, and I think it's been presented to around 2,000 architects across the UK and Ireland. So that CPD program features the tour of the Roka Gallery, and that's really one of our most popular ones that we offer. So during this time, we have the architects, the project architects from Zaha Hadid, architects Margaret Falova and Gonzalo de Tela Portugal, who was the project manager. And the tour looks at, you know, this, you know, the kind of fascinating story of how the building took shape, and really looks at the very, you know, conceptual and technical development of the project and all of the different challenges. You know, we have things like the very iconic double curvature of the walls that Zaha Hadid was very famous for. But this tour in particular, you know, we do offer it out to the public as part of our public programming, but also we offer it as a CPD, so architects can come along, they can do the tour, they can meet the architects that actually worked on it, and then they can, you know, network for a bit afterwards, have a drink. You know, it's a very nice, relaxed atmosphere, and they can also gain their CPD points. And actually, one interesting thing that we adapted during the pandemic was, obviously the gallery had to close last year for about 6 months, but we still wanted to be able to offer the tour to architects and designers who wanted, you know, just something interesting to watch, but also to continue on in getting their CPD points for the year. So we worked with the Architects Journal, and actually as part of the AJ100 Festival, which Roka were a headline sponsor, they actually came and filmed a 35-minute kind of documentary film about the space. So we had interviews from Woody Yao and Maha Kute, who are the design directors from Zaha Hadid. And just the film really, you know, it captured all the stunning architecture, and also, again, same as the tour, delved into that construction and design approach into the space. So it was a really nice thing to be able to offer our you know, people who might have come and done the tour in person, or just, again, wanted to gain their points. It was something a bit different, a building tour, but, you know, it was in a documentary format, so they could watch it whenever they wanted, and also get their points. Unfortunately, because of it was a bit more difficult to do, say, a live tour of the space, because it is so vast, and it's, you know, it would kind of
logistically difficult.
Yeah, it would have been them walking around with a laptop. But, you know, the other thing as well with the, you know, the other CPDs that we were able to offer as part of the program, they were able to just continue online because they were webinar presentations. So they were able to keep going, but we still wanted to engage with the audience, and still, you know, obviously we couldn't have any events, but we wanted to be able to engage with people who would have normally been visiting us, or, you know, on our mailing list. And because we were kind of big believers in, you know, not saying anything when we don't have much to say, so it was really nice for us to have something else to give out, and again, just something a bit more innovative, and to, you know, do this while, you know, they couldn't visit, basically.
Brilliant. We didn't quite catch the last bit there, but I mean, that what a fantastic story. And one thing we didn't mention, actually, in terms of what's important to specify is, you know, we absolutely shouldn't forget the importance and the value of having a CPD program. And it's something we see at NBS. You know, architects and others have to carry out a mandatory number of CPD points per year, and you know, a lot of that shifted to digital during the pandemic. Quite a bit of it shifted back now, but I think we're going to see that blended approach of you know, physical and digital CPD going forward. And it's a really great way to build manufacturers' brands with that audience. And we know from research that we've done in the past that a large number of architects or specifiers that, you know, see access a manufacturer's CPD will go on to specify one of their products at some point. So thank you very much for sharing that story, Saoirse. And the gallery looks fascinating, and hope to get to visit it at some point in time.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. Good. Well, from the beautiful and elegant to back to the nuts and bolts of things, and probably bring you back in here, Lee, because we teed this one up earlier.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world of regulations and industry change that manufacturers really need to be aware of, and making sure that they're looking at. So you've got a couple of slides for us here. First one is around building safety.
Yep. So yeah, on the safety side of things, most people on the call will likely be aware of the draft building safety bill. Obviously, most of this is the outcome of Building a Safer Future, which was the report Dame Judith Hackett was commissioned to do following Grenfell. A lot's progressed over the past few years on this, and even though a few things have been held up with the pandemic, there's been quite a lot of progression this year, with a lot of expectations that are going to be coming into force next year, namely the building regulation changes. Now, there's a lot of changes around appointed parties and reliance on information, but for any manufacturers that are listening, there's actually the draft construction product regulations are actually available now. I've put the link on the slide there. It's on the .gov website, but these are free to download and check. Most of the time, these things don't change a lot between the draft and the publication, so there's a lot there that people can use to gear up to. But I've just sort of highlighted the 8 key points I think that people really need to focus on. So there's general product safety, goes without saying. There's then the focus on safety critical products. This has a list that's yet to be defined. There's been a talk about safety critical products when in reality most products could be dangerous if used incorrectly or in a different way. So that still needs to be outlined. But I think the big thing is probably number 3 around declaration performance requirements. Now, the regulation does stipulate what the information is required to be purveyed within that. Great news for manufacturers that are on things like MBS source is a lot of that data is already there in existence and structured, so that could be reused for these purposes. But there's focus around things like economic operators. So you might not be the manufacturer, you could be the vendor of a product, so i.e. a builder's merchant that procures a product from a manufacturer and then sells that as your own brand with its own brand name. These requirements and the regulations are going to fall onto you to make sure that you're complying. So there's a lot there that people need to be taken into account from an obligatory point of view. It discusses the enforcement, how the HSE are going to enforce this, and also what the repercussions could be for not doing it. But I think quite interestingly, 2 other points that it goes into is workmanship. So you might be a manufacturer that provides an installation services alongside this. So how products are installed is quite important. It's something that MBS Chorus does quite well. So MBS Chorus is our online spec tool, and a lot of manufacturers will know this is if they've got the products listed on source, they can be added directly into the spec through Chorus. But another thing that Chorus does that a manufacturer might not be aware of is execution clauses. So we'll actually go into providing templates for the designers and specifiers to actually write how the product systems, materials should be installed, how they should be done safely, what level of workmanship has to be done, etc. Now, there's a lot that manufacturers can do there through the source and Chorus collaboration functions to actually work with the specifiers to do it. So from a personal perspective, I think there's going to be a lot more earlier engagement from the specifier to the manufacturer on this, but ultimately you need to be up to speed with the regulations. And then lastly, the new regulations refer to sustainability, which was a bit of a surprise to me when I first read them. Obviously, the big focus and the reason for these changes coming into force was safety, but sustainability is sat within that as well. So on the bullet points on the right hand side, Robin, I think there's a couple that were animated in there. Obviously, the regulations are going to govern many aspects of products, some that you might not quite realize. So I'd recommend having a read through them. And then obviously the product data ultimately needs to be clear, easy to access and digital. Now, this is something that the Code for Construction Product Information is aiming to do. So the CPA have launched the the CCPI. There's a lot of acronyms. It reminds me of the BIM thing, sort of going back 10 years ago when nobody understood anything that was going on. But the Code for Construction Product Information, or CCPI, however you want to call it, is something that it's highlighted in things like the TIP 2030 roadmap. There's a lot of heavyweight backing in the background behind this. It's a scheme that manufacturers can sign up to. It's not for profit, so there is costs involved in it, and those are published on the CPA's website for this. But it goes through how manufacturers have to provide clear and ambiguous data, how it has to be structured, but also the processes for getting the manufacturers in-house order validated. So what are they doing to maintain data, how are they revising information, who's responsible for it, and so forth. It's not just on how the data is structured itself. With the data structure, if you're on MBS Source, we're already taking away a lot of the hard work there. So if you do want to know more, talk to us. Coincidentally, the actual research piece that was done, which was the construction product survey, was actually conducted by MBS on behalf of the CPA as the precursor to the Code for Construction Product Information being launched. So there's a lot that
it's worth saying, Lee, it's not in this yet, but having seen the data from our marketing survey that we've just done, it looks like there's unanimous support and backing from the manufacturers that we surveyed in favour of the construction code for product information, and that it will bring about a positive effect, which I think is really good and highlights the importance of it.
Yeah. I think, however, it's been perceived or received by different people that the main aim is to make the industry better, and that can only be a good thing. But from a manufacturing perspective, you've got to make sure your data's digital, it's structured and easy to access. Otherwise, the whole thing's going to fall on its head. So, from a safety point of view, I think those are the high level bits. There's a lot more, but obviously we're on limited time.
I think we've got other webinars on that for people that would like to check out more. We've got full webinars about building safety, and I'm sure.
Yeah, we've got a few quick minute reads as well, Robin, on the mbs.com on the resources pages on this too.
Great. And then on to the other big one in terms of macro themes, which is sustainability.
Yeah. I don't know if you just want to flick the bullet points at the end through, save talking through them. But yeah, from a sustainability perspective, obviously there's a massive focus on this, and it's going to be ongoing. Regulations are going to be changing in the sector to combat this. I mentioned the ban on gas boilers earlier, but there's a lot more that's going to come. Just very quickly run through COP26. We did a webinar on this that went out a couple of weeks ago. It's on demand if you want to check it out at the mbs.com. But we reviewed basically everything that impacted the construction sector. So from the first time, it was the first COP that explicitly mentioned fossil fuels, and in particular coal. So there's a lot of transition going around that. But I think that the big one was that UK listed companies are going to be expected to produce a net zero roadmap by 2023. So going back to the specification thing, it's not just about how your products are, it's what you're doing as a business and your sustainable credentials, and how you're delivering that to the specifier to allow them to make the decisions not only on how that product's going to perform, but are they procuring from somebody that's doing things ethically and sustainably. And then the UK Green Building Council on the Built Environment Day launched the Net Zero Embodied Carbon Roadmap. This is something that's going to be put to Parliament for consideration, but I expect a lot of that to come and actually formulate a lot of the roadmap that's going to move forward to make the built environment a lot more sustainable. So it's a bit of a heads up and a view on what's coming at the Apex. So check that out. But yeah, big one, and this can tend to go under the radar. The Competition and Markets Authority can struggle sometimes to reach built environment sector manufacturers, but obviously we all fall under that hat. They launched at the end of October the Green Claims Code. Now, what this says, it's very similar to the Code for Construction Product Information, but whereas that focuses on safety, the CMA's version focuses on sustainability. Now, the whole point of it is to avoid greenwashing. It's something that we see a lot of. Obviously, sustainability is at the top of most people's minds, and it's quite easy to say, oh yeah, look, we will put some pictures of some wind farms on the back of the marketing or change the colour of the packaging to green and whatever, but ultimately the specifiers need to make very concise decisions to enable the project to be delivered
and
as
performance
efficiently as
information.
Possible. So the same rules apply: truthful and accurate information and unambiguous, so people can make sort of informed decisions. So don't hide anything that's obviously important. And I think that the next thing is the substantiation. The CCPI touches on this as well, as if you can get information validated by a third party, it really shows that what you're saying is true, because it's been vetted that way. So really high level, how you conduct your business is going to be assessed. How your products are sourced and produced will be as well. Obviously, then in performance from in use, but also end of life. It's something that does get overlooked. Even if we look at something like the RIBA plan of work, it's something that's used by the industry day in, day out, and not just for architects. The whole construction sector uses it. Ideally, that could probably do with the stage 8 for end of life. It terminates at stage 7, which is the in-use phase. But we need to consider this. And then again, it just falls back to digital. The only way that we can surface this is through digital means. So make it easy to access. And you've probably done half the bottle there for the specifier.
Yeah, great. And Joe, this is obviously a huge theme that's not going anywhere, and is likely to, snowball in terms of the effect of media attention and the pressure from wider groups on manufacturers and construction more generally to do more.
Definitely. I think people need to have their comm strategy in place, but make sure it's backed up by meaningful advice and meaningful facts, as Lee was just mentioning. The other thing, I think we've touched upon it earlier, but it's about making sure that inaccurate or historic, outdated information is removed from all your channels. So, de-risk, your comms by doing a really, really detailed and thorough audit, and probably make sure that a senior person is doing that. It's too important to leave it to someone who's a little bit newer to the industry and isn't sure what they're doing. But please go through your channels, make sure that anything that's not valid or not accurate or not up to date is taken off, so that people aren't making wrong specifications that could then come back to harm you later on. 100%.
Well, on that point, actually, I've got another stat now. We've touched on this theme quite a lot. So this is fresh from our survey that's coming out in January, and around managing product information. So we asked our manufacturers how they go about managing their product information, and 63% saying they use PDFs as their main tool, followed by spreadsheets, followed by Microsoft Word. Only 23% using a PIM, which is a product information management system or digital system, which I think that is all of that is quite worrying, really. Andy, if you showed this to an e-commerce retailer, comparing to how they would go about managing their product information for consumer goods or whatever it might be, what would they say?
It would look a touch different to this. Yeah, it's fair to say.
Yeah. So personally, I think construction has got an awful lot to learn from other industries that are already doing this, that can take information about products, manage it all digitally, integrate it with warehousing and logistics and stores, and you can still go on their website and order something that'll be there in the morning, and that the information about it is absolutely accurate. The technologies that are absolutely there to do that. I think it shows that construction's got a long way in terms of process and culture to make some of that happen. So I think there's going to be a lot of talking points around this. Lee, were you surprised to see this?
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised to see, but yeah, it's I think it's shocking. I think not surprising, but it's expected. I've worked in the manufacturing sector for 20 odd years before I worked for MBS, and I've got quite a funny slide on this about, I think the managing product information in another way. It could be in Bob's drawer or in the back of someone's mind. It really is quite terrifying. But I think the biggest thing that a lot of people don't realise is they might be doing PDFs and thinking that's digital, while it is, it's not machine readable. And that's really where we're trying to get that interoperability piece, where data can be kept up to date on the fly and it can be read from one or the other. I think one key thing to mention, and it links back to what Joe was saying about making sure that the information's up to date and you're removing old data, is don't forget to archive that correctly, because you're still going to need to refer back to it. And there's a lot in the regulatory changes talking about unique identifiers. And obviously source listings, we do that. We've got a thing that will actually archive the data already within that and give a unique reference. But for your own websites and so forth, it's something that you need to factor into.
100%. Brilliant. Right, we've just got a couple more questions left, and then we'll jump on to questions from the audience. So if we've got a few come through already, but if anyone's got anything that they would like to ask the panel, please put that in the Q&A, and we'll cover it in a moment. So next one was onto technology. So what marketing technologies should manufacturers consider? And again, I've got another stat from the research here, just giving us a flavour of what tools manufacturers are saying that they're already using. So plenty using social media and email marketing systems. Not so many using marketing automation. And Andy, I wondered if you had a view here around, is this what you'd expect to see? Are we missing a trick? What other tools and technologies should manufacturers be considering within their mix?
Yeah, so well, it's encouraging to see social media at the top, which is
good. Yeah,
I would absolutely be an advocate of that. But it's interesting if you pick underneath that, because we deal with a lot of B2B businesses. It's like lots of people have purchased a tool to help them do social media, to think that the tool alone will help them.
We'll fix it.
Yeah, which, I mean, I shouldn't really be saying this given the company I helped found. So but that's the reality of the situation. You try and build a tool, but it's about behavior change to really make the tool work. Yeah. And but there's a couple of other tools that I thought I might want to call out for everyone that's on this session, that will definitely be a part that will really help in 2022, especially considering one of the data points you showed earlier, Robin, which was some of the biggest challenges people face with their marketing, which is lack of time and resource. Now, you might need to do a bit of reading on this, but basically I would advise anyone who's in marketing to go away and research a technology called GPT-3. It will be game-changing for everyone. Because it's a machine learning algorithm that is unbelievable at creating written content at a degree of accuracy that you will struggle to believe. So, and we've started building a tool using this technology, and basically it's going to automate content creation. Yeah, Vivian, yeah, GPT-3. I won't go into what it.
I think we're all scribbling that one down. Thanks.
Yeah. So there's tools that use it already. So we're building a tool in this technology, but for full transparency, tools already exist like this. So copy.ai is really good as well. So that's a tool that already exists that basically allows you to put in a few keywords and it will create marketing copy for you. Short form, long form, title, text, phenomenal. That is a massive thing that's going to help us into next year. But of course, it still needs a human eye to go over this to make sure that it absolutely is bang on what you need. But it's going to take a lot of the legwork out of copy creation, which is a huge time sink, as anyone knows who works in marketing. If you then combine that, because the bit that GPT-3 misses is the data-driven approach to what are the kind of search terms that we want to rank for, what are the questions that our audience want to ask. So the other tool recommendation I would give you outside of our product, Content Cal, but is something called keywordstrategytool.com. It's an entirely free tool. It's built by a friend of mine. It's brilliant. Keywordstrategytool.com basically will tell you the most popular search terms for a given query and all of the specific questions that people are asking related to a certain search term or category. And it will rank it in terms of how many searches people are doing on that particular term across both Google and YouTube, which, as we know, are the two primary search engines. So super powerful. Take all of the research from Keyword Strategy Tool based on what the questions that your audience really want to know. Take that, then plug some of those kind of findings in, so like the little phrases, the questions, plug that into a tool that runs on GPT-3 like copy.ai, and you have in about 20 minutes incredible copy that's created across questions that your audience are desperate to get answers for. Now, if that doesn't speed up content creation.
Wow. All right, there you go. There's content strategy in a can there. Thanks, Andy. That was a absolute golden nugget, I think, for a few of us. I think we're all probably going to go away and look that up.
Yeah.
I was looking at some software called Jarvis, which must be working on the same technology, Andy. And I was reading some reviews about whether it works or not. And there was a really lengthy review, really detailed, fantastic. And then at the end, it said that this review was written using the tool itself. And I think that just paints the picture completely, because I wouldn't have expected it. It was bang on.
It's ridiculous.
What a brilliant piece of marketing.
Yeah, Jarvis, just like Copy AI, exactly the same thing. So yeah,
right, okay.
Tech, yeah.
Okay. And Ian, I was actually going to bring you back in on this one in terms of, marketing automation software is pretty low on there. Do you think everyone knows what it is, and what do you think the benefits can be for, construction manufacturers?
Yeah, no, I think everyone knows what it is. I think there's a correlation here in this chart that you're showing here of the associated cost as well.
Yeah,
marketing automation tools aren't cheap.
Yeah.
But I think that part of the change that, we're all talking about change, and a part of the direction of travel that I think as marketers we need to be thinking about and need to be heading towards is delivering the right message to the right people at the right time. It's a really kind of tailored messaging, segmented messaging, and actually it's the marketing automation tools which make that easier. It is possible to do it other ways, but it makes it a lot easier. And actually we just surveyed our customers, and people are starting to mention that I only want information that's relevant to me. So I think maybe it's not an absolute requirement at the moment, but I think there's an expectation that this is possible to do. That actually, as a consumer of your information, I don't want everything. I just want the stuff that's really relevant to me. So a marketing automation tool will help that. And also the flip side of that is you then potentially need to create a lot more content, and therefore maybe that brings in the tools that Andy's just mentioned. So there's challenges around that, but I absolutely think that's the direction that certainly next year we should be thinking about. But going forwards, it will be the norm.
Yeah, well, loads. Again, we could do another webinar probably just on that subject. I'll just jump. We're on to the last couple of questions now. I'll jump onto this one. Sorry, Lee, did you want to jump in on that quickly?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the search engine optimization tools, I think probably the number one question I get asked by manufacturers when I'm talking to them at MBS is, how can we get our product listings to sit higher than our competitors? And it's amazing how many of them just don't consider SEO. So just using the right keywords and your product names, your descriptions, anything that you're doing is obviously going to be a benefit there.
100%. And we know from specifiers that a lot of the play, oftentimes they will start with Google or another search engine when they're finding products, and they may end up on your website, or they may end up somewhere else. So you want to own that. And if you haven't checked it out, we have a webinar specifically about SEO, Marketing Masterclass for manufacturers SEO, that we did a month or two back. So that's on the website. Please go and have a look, and you can find out more.
I've got another tip, and it's, I know a lot of people have quite constrained budgets, but there's a free crowdsourced resource of comms tools called PR Stack. So if you Google that and find it, there's a lot of information, a lot of tools there. It was written a few years ago, but there's still a lot of very, very good tools. Some are free and some are quite low cost. Others have a higher cost, but it's there, and it's been sourced by PR professionals. So it's a handy starting guide as well.
Yeah, really good. Thank you, Joe. Everyone loves a top tool tip, so we'll all check that out, I think. So next one was around ROI, and this was one that came up as a big challenge, and is an ongoing challenge for marketers, is to demonstrate the ROI on it. Andy, I know we've got a couple of slides from you in a moment on this. I guess Saoirse, actually, as someone who's kind of working at the cold face of it, and you're certainly more at the end of kind of brand marketing, which is the harder part to measure sometimes. How do you go about doing this at Roka in terms of measuring the ROI on marketing?
Absolutely. We are marketing the brand itself, and raising brand awareness. And I suppose this particular area mightn't be within my expertise, unfortunately, in the area that I cover within the company. But I mean, we would certainly we're definitely, I suppose, on the digital side of how people are using our tools, and incorporating the SEO and SEMrush and different tools that we can track our visitors a lot more. We actually launched a new website last year, the new Roka site for the UK, and that was just ultimately so much more better and user friendly for us to be able to see how long people are spending on each page, tracking where they're going, having different areas. We have a designated area now for installers and for our professionals, architects and designers. I guess that's going a little bit
but you've clearly got an organization that recognizes the value of brand marketing.
Oh, absolutely. And
that, you know, that's probably with what a lot of manufacturers struggle with. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we even, I mean, there was a new concept introduced the year before last called Roka Life, which is basically articles that are really, you know, it's looking at kind of the forefront of a number of significant developments in bathroom design. You know, it's looking at sustainability, technology. It serves really as a platform where all these tips and suggestions over kind of a brand that's 100 years old has kind of collated into these helpful articles.
Yeah.
You know, they are for, you know, the end user, but also if, you know, a retailer or a plumber installer comes to me and they want to have content for social media for their own website, we can share this with them. They can see it on our website. They can get all the tips of, you know, all the things that our products can offer, and that's really helpful to them, so they can incorporate that into their marketing campaigns, so they also have content moving forward. Because, you know, while all these tools, and it's going a little bit back to the last question, while all the tools are really excellent to have, it's kind of how do you incorporate them into kind of meaningful content, and where do you put that content, and how do you design that content?
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that's a nice segue into back to Mr. Lambert, who has a couple of slides to walk us through in terms of you know, an ROI process that can work well for any business for marketing.
Yeah, I'll fly through this quite quickly. Yeah.
Sure.
So fundamentally, what I see quite often when I'm looking at people's strategies, and I've done for the last kind of 10 years, I often see a disconnect between what people are trying to achieve with their content strategy versus what someone's trying to achieve with their business strategy. The closer you can interlink your content strategy to your organizational goals, the more seriously marketing will be taken within the organization, and the more impact you can create with marketing. So that's the high level. And then fundamentally, I think often in marketing, we overcomplicate what is actually not rocket science, because fundamentally, we've got three core things we're trying to achieve, certainly with our content marketing efforts. You've either got the top bit of the funnel, which is awareness, which is what Serge has already spoken about, like brand awareness, going big, ultimately, getting our product, brand, whatever, in front of as many people as possible. Then you've got the consideration stage, a second bit of the funnel. I consider this the trust building phase, where we're building engagement, we're building emotional connection between our brand and others. And then we've got conversion, where we're essentially requiring an action from someone. And in the most case, as everyone on this call is going to be a commercially led organization, you know, it's going to be sales. So we're either trying to go big, we're trying to build trust, or we're trying to drive sales. They are three core objectives. So with that, when we can simplify those objectives, we don't need to track everything. And I see lots of people getting lost in like doing weekly social media and content marketing reports and getting lost in the myriad of data points. Well, actually, we should just focus on the metrics that really matter, those metrics that help us understand if we're going north or not. So quite simply, top of the funnel, about reach, impressions, and share of voice. If you're not familiar with share of voice, it's the one I geek out over more than anything. And I'll show you what that is in a second. Like consideration, i.e. trust building, there's a load of things we could use in that. We could look at increasing an engagement rate. We could look at overall engagement, or we could look at like site performance. Saoirse touched on this as well. Like what pages are people focusing on? Are they spending more time on that site? Are they looking through lots of different pages on a certain part of our website? All of that's readily available in Google Analytics. And of course, conversion, leads, sales, etc. But I always kind of use that with a bit of a caveat to say, like, if you are looking to just drive sales through an organic social media approach, you'll probably be disappointed. So fundamentally, social media works much, much better and content marketing in general is all about top of the funnel. And I've got follower growth and engagement on the right-hand side, because I often see, I can't tell you the amount of strategies from B2B businesses where we're like, oh, our social media plan is to double our followers. Utter nonsense. So honestly, like if you're spending, you shouldn't focus on those metrics that don't make sense to an overall business's ambition. If they don't make sense to a business ambition, forget them. Is the one thing I would say when we're thinking about trying to be really clear of our objectives, which kind of takes us on to the next slide, which is not something I can take credit from. This is Mark Ritson, who is a very vocal marketer. If you read Marketing Week, you know Mark Ritson. Basically, us as marketers like to skip to the good bit, which is the end bit, promotion. We think about tactics all the time, but we don't think enough about diagnosis. So that's where Mark Ritson's about, like, proper marketers start here. Who's it for? What's it for? What's the story we're trying to tell? What's the purpose behind this? When we understand that, and most businesses will understand that, then we can work through the process, which will lead us to the tactics we want to employ. we've spoken about channels already, and they're all well and good, but fundamentally, if our story's not right, if what we're trying to tell is not going to resonate, it doesn't matter what channel we put it on, we're not going to win. So yeah, start with clear objectives, a clear understanding of the audience we're trying to serve and their pain points, how we address that through our targeting and positioning, and then we can go into the execution phase at the end. It's one of my favorite graphics. So basically,
love that chart. Yeah, it just completely nails it.
That is marketing on one slide, basically.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's plenty of Mark Ritson content and webinars out there. So if anyone's looking to brush up on their general marketing knowledge, it's a good one to watch. If you don't mind a bit of profanity and some strong opinions.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, he's a lover of the F-bomb, that one.
Yeah.
He's just done a really good one for Festive Marketing about smaller brands, how to do marketing well. And
that's really interesting, because and this was going to come up in the Q&A actually, in terms of how smaller manufacturers obviously don't have those deep pockets, but still need to execute on quite a lot of the same things. So how can they best go about doing that?
Yeah, there's a 1 hour webinar from him, so I'll share that and so it can come out to everyone later.
Great, thank you, Joe.
Great shout. All right.
Share a voice, Andy, you mentioned.
Yeah, I should have brought this up in the tools bit, but I'll touch on it. It's basically, you can get a free trial of this tool, and in the 14-day free trial, you'll get what you need out of it. So it's called mentionlytics.com. Click that little pie chart icon that you see there, and this will tell you your share of voice. Basically, what share of voice is the count of 1 of every time you're mentioned, not just across social, but the whole internet, review sites, YouTube, Google, wherever. And for me, this is super, super powerful, because you can pop in all of your competitors. And really, if you think your 2022 strategy is all about getting your business known and going further and reaching more people, I think most people would nod their head to that. And then looking at your share of voice using a tool like this, and you don't need to pay for it. I think you should be able to just do this in the free trial. Basically, get a baseline for where you're at today. Look at your share of voice. Look how much of the share of the conversation you have versus your competitors. And then benchmark that, or just check every single quarter where you're at. Are you moving forward? Are you increasing the share of your voice? Because then that for me governs all of the other metrics I look at. Because if this is not moving forward, it doesn't matter what the other metrics are saying, because we're not moving forward. We're not going north. So yeah, for me, this is a big one. Right. And just I'll touch on the other ones just really quickly. I'm just conscious of time. And looking at your own performance over the course of last year, and there are loads of analytics tools you can do. I'm showing Content Cal, but basically looking at your previous performance in 2021 and understanding the things that resonated the best, your top performing content, etc., will give you a really nice clue as to the things we can use to build on as a foundation into 2022, which goes into the next slide, because I'm particularly nosy about competition. So on the tool that we've created, you can put in all of your competition, see all of the content that's working well for them, see how you rank against them. And then I think we've got one more slide there. Yeah, cool. And basically look at all of their content ranked in terms of the performance of it, which will give you really nice insights in terms of what are the things that are working for our competition, what channels are they using, what times are they using, what's the themes and the topics. So this will help us inspire our creativity. Whilst I don't condone out and out plagiary, what I do recommend inspiration. Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully there's a few tips into getting those tactics to be able to track ROI correctly, and then be able to navigate towards achieving your targets by looking at some inspiration through your share of voice, through looking at your own performance and looking at your competitors' performance.
Brilliant. I think. Brilliant. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, some really, really, really insightful tips there for content strategy and share of voice, which is probably something that not a lot of manufacturers might be thinking about. So I think there's a lot that can be done there. Definitely. Right. Final one, and we'll just do a quick couple of minutes on this. Probably Lee and Ian. Within all that in the mix, obviously MBS and Glenigan can help manufacturers get much closer to both the specifiers and to the information about projects. So just quickly, Lee, in terms of how NBS and NBS Source can help with this mix, what are your kind of top takeaways?
Top takeaways. So yeah, obviously different information is required at different stages throughout the whole project, whether it's CPD at the early stages, from where people are looking for inspiration or learning to looking to learn something new. Might be specifically regarding a change to legislation, or it could just be on a specific material product that they've not used before. All the practices are looking for that. We provide the RIBA CPD service. But then moving into the design specification stages, Source is a one-stop shop for construction products. It'll list all that information digitally and importantly machine readable. So all the stuff that we've spoke about earlier about sourcing your information clear and unambiguous and keeping records of things, it covers all of that. But I think the absolute sort of bulletproof benefit to it is the fact that it links to MBS Chorus. So Chorus is MBS's only specification tool now. It's used by the majority of specifiers in the UK and doesn't obviously have any competition. If your products are in Source, they can be dropped directly into Chorus from a seamless manner because the data's surfaced from the same place. And then lastly, manufacturers can have Chorus as well if they have a license of that. A lot of manufacturers will provide specification writing as a service to the end users. One, it saves the specifier time, but also makes sure that the products, systems, whatever they are specified correctly, because nobody knows that better than the manufacturer. Whereas you used to maybe have created something in Word or PDF, you can actually now do that in the format that the specifier is using. So it's that time benefit again and accuracy. And then lastly, we've got a load of tools that can integrate all of your source listings into your own website with the magical add to spec button. So you can actually get the specifier to spec a product direct from your own website using the MBS as the background information.
Yeah, and the thing about the platform, Lee, is a lot of marketing will be very good and reach people, but it's very hard to reach them at the time when they actually need to specify or select a product.
Exactly.
Whereas if you can reach them within the specification environment or on the manufacturer's website, at the moment they need that information, it's kind of incredibly targeted and precise. And especially if they've seen other marketing around that, whether it's a nice case study on Instagram or a piece of content or a YouTube video, whatever it might be, they're going to be much more likely to select that product. Brilliant. And then just on to obviously we're MBS and Glenigan working very closely together now, Ian, and Glenigan providing a platform that really helps manufacturers find projects and contacts, and MBS then helping them get in the spec. How can Glenigan help manufacturers in 2022 as part of that mix?
Yeah, I really see Glenigan as the flip side to the same coin of MBS, in that with MBS you're able to get your products in front of specifiers, and we know from the survey that it's also contractors that manufacturers want to get in front of.
100%.
So for those who don't know, at Glenigan we're identifying and researching all construction projects. So it enables you to identify opportunities for where your products are likely to be needed and get in touch with the right people who are going to be purchasing those products, or hopefully are going to be purchasing your products. So it's a proactive tool that helps people identify people to have really meaningful conversations with at the right time. So like I say, complements the NBS product really, really well.
Yeah, and brings that data-driven approach to the marketing strategy that's so fundamental to sit alongside all the brand marketing and so on. Brilliant. And if for anyone who hasn't seen it, you should definitely download this from our website. It's completely free. It's the construction and specification marketing cycle. So it goes through the key phases that a specifier will go through when running a project or looking for products. And it's about thinking about the channels and the marketing content that's relevant for you and relevant for them at each point in time, and then working out how you can provide that and helping you have a framework that's really going to deliver a truly integrated marketing strategy and get some results. So wow, we're almost out of time. We're going to take a couple of questions from the audience that have come through via the Q&A. The first one, actually, I'll jump back to something we touched on earlier. Joe, I might ask this one to you if that's all right. But in terms of those smaller manufacturers who, unfortunately don't have the luxury of or the budget to create a gallery space or run huge events or whatever it might be, how can they make best use of their budgets and their efforts next year in 2022?
I think sometimes creativity doesn't cost a lot.
Yeah.
So coming up with a great idea and a great way to reach people. And then some of the channels that are perhaps lower cost would be social media. We've heard a lot about from Andy and how you can do the metrics. The other thing that I'd say is investing in your brand. and people think, oh, that's going to be loads of advertising, really, really expensive. But one other route is PR. I would say that because I'm a PR practitioner. But one of the things that's really important to remember is that in any B2B marketing, 95% of your audience aren't in the market right now, or won't be in the market at that point. So what you need to do is focus on the salient, so that when people start to look, they think about your brand name first. So it's investing in that brand. And if you've built that visibility through PR, through great social media, and then one of the other things is, if you're in a big heritage media brand, loads of people might not necessarily see that, but if you put that out on your Twitter, if you put that out on your social channels, then you get that sort of heritage halo effect. So PR, very, very powerful and relatively low cost compared to other marketing channels. But obviously I'm quite biased because I'm a PR person.
No, I can vouch for that. We've seen the effects of having a really comprehensive PR strategy, and it doesn't kind of some of it goes in print, but a lot of it goes in digital. It's kind of medium neutral, if you like, but well worth investing in. Question.
Yeah, no, just to say, Joanna, I completely agree with you about, it can happen at a point when people are not actually looking. So it's building the brand awareness so it's in their mind. And one way we've really tried to engage with the audience on social media is through students and the younger generation. Because if you look at our stats, a lot of our, it's kind of under 40s, it's kind of people that are using our social media mostly. And it's really surprising, we've been here 10 years and we'll have people who say, oh, I came here for a student tour in 2013, or I saw you something on Instagram, and they've now graduated, they're working for an architecture practice, and they're specking us, and they say, oh, I remember I came for a talk, or something it just came to my mind about Roka and bathrooms, so I've come back now to specify for this project. And that's a really lovely thing to see, because it means that all of the hard work that we're putting in, even though at the time we might not see it, but then it's the longevity, it's things that you're doing kind of like a duck and water, kind of all the things you're doing underneath, and then eventually they'll come to fruition, and that's when it's kind of the most rewarding thing. But it's definitely kind of getting in the mind early on.
A lasting impression, and absolutely.
Exactly.
Really powerful. Quick one for you, Lee, from Vivian. What is the golden thread? And try and do 30 seconds on it. I think we've probably got a webinar or two on that one that people should check out, but just quickly.
We've got an article as well.
We've lost your audio a bit, Lee. I don't know if you're
sorry, the switch on the headset. So the golden thread is the information about the project throughout the whole project life cycle, which is collated from the conception stage right through to in use, and it's maintained through that. The whole purpose of knowing what assets are in the building, but ultimately to keep people safe and to allow those to be maintained accurately. I think there's a better description on our website of that, but I think in a nutshell that's what it is. It's
I think you captured it, and it's a big subject, so well worth reading up on. Final question for the panel, a quick fire one for a great question from Jackie, actually. One for all of you. Just one thing. What would be the one thing that you would, or one key area to focus marketing strategy on in 2022? So, Ian, as you're at the top of my screen, we'll go through one by one. What would you say?
It's a huge question to answer in a matter of seconds. But I guess one observation of last year is that I think video, has become a much more kind of accessible tool that maybe previously would have eaten huge marketing budgets. I think because of everything that happened last year, there's almost an acceptance that videos might not be Spielberg-esque in their production value. But I think actually we just see that every bit of analysis is saying that video is such a highly consumable medium. But I would say that it's definitely something worth considering.
Brilliant. Yeah, totally agree. Joe?
Sorry, my thing's frozen. Okay, I've got there in the end. Another tactic that's really, really powerful is newsjacking when things are breaking that a lot about. Don't feel afraid. Don't think that because necessarily you're a bit smaller, you can't join the debate. If you know something about it, the news media is really, really keen to hear from you and have your contribution. And related to that is radio, incredibly powerful medium. People do really take on board what's said, and linking to that, the new generation of radio podcasting, there's lots and lots of very niche podcasts with very, very loyal audiences. Think about creating a podcast engagement strategy.
Brilliant, thank you. And Saoirse?
I would say one of the biggest things would be collaborations. I know it's been a big thing, but I think now it's more important than ever. I think Roka, we have at the moment about 17 partner organizations that we work with. So I think it's really important to, especially if you have maybe a smaller budget, maybe trying to do something, even if it's a small thing like a cross promotion on social media with an organization that reflects your brand. If it stretches a bit further, maybe a sponsorship or, a relevant kind of spokesperson to even align with you, who will, they might have like a big following or a lot of clout in the industry that can kind of represent your brand. They can lend their expertise, and also you can have access to their audience as well. So it's just really bringing yourself together with these organizations.
Yeah, that's fantastic shout. Really good. Andy?
Yeah, I'll pick on some of the things that have been said already. Joanna already called it out, which is investing brand. Understand the importance of trust, and Saoirse's called it out as well, like humanizing that brand as well. Fantastic trust builder. Get some key individuals across the business. MBS do this really well, actually. Key individuals across the business to be the talking heads of your brand. Nothing builds trust like having a human face to your business. And as a smaller organization, you have an unfair advantage in that regard as well, because you're not constrained by brand standards and corporate policies. So I think there's a huge amount to be had from that. So if B2B marketers can think more like our B2C peers, I'll repeat it again, then we're a winner.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. And just finally, Lee, what would your one thing be?
I think I'd suggest checking that how you surface the information about your products digitally as fit for purpose. Could somebody do everything they need to do with how you're doing that and do it easily? Is probably where I'd start. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, there you go. Jackie asked for one, and we got 5 or 6 there. So, but I think that was all really, really insightful, and that really wraps things up. So yeah, we've used the full time, and that was an incredibly useful debate. If the research we mentioned at the beginning is coming out in January, so please tune in for that, and we'll be doing a webinar on it as well as publishing it as a full report, and it's the inaugural report, so definitely worth checking out if you're a manufacturer or if you work in the marketing space within construction. So that's it really. Just want to say a huge thank you to the panel, Ian, Joe, Saoirse, Andy and Lee. Really appreciate your time. We've had a fantastic response again with loads of people on the line dialing in for this. So yeah, please check out more on the MBS website. Please feel free to connect with or reach out to any of the panelists, and hopefully we'll see you again next time. All right, thank you guys.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.